The moment she saw his name, her breath stopped. The conference room, once filled with quiet authority and the soft hum of corporate ambition, suddenly felt suffocating. The polished glass table, the neatly stacked documents, the silent board members, everything blurred into the background as her eyes locked onto a single line in the will. A name she had dismissed, erased, and thrown out of her company just days ago. A name that now carried the weight of guilt, shock, and a truth she was not ready to face. Before we dive deeper into this emotional story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of compassion, and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Evelyn Carter had built her reputation on one principle: efficiency over emotion. As the CEO of Carter Global Holdings, she was known across industries as a woman who never hesitated, never looked back, and never allowed personal feelings to cloud business decisions. Employees feared her silence more than her anger. Investors admired her sharp instincts. Competitors avoided crossing her path. She was ruthless, precise, and untouchable. But beneath the layers of control and discipline was a woman who had spent years trying to prove something, to a father who was never easily impressed, to a world that doubted her, and perhaps most of all, to herself. The morning she fired Daniel Hayes was like any other. Or at least, that's what she thought. Daniel had worked as a janitor in the building for nearly 5 years. He was quiet, almost invisible to most. He came early, left late, and did his job without complaint. No one knew much about him, except that he was raising a young daughter alone after losing his wife years ago. Some employees noticed how he always carried a small lunchbox with cartoon stickers, how he occasionally answered calls in a soft, reassuring tone, likely speaking to his child. To Evelyn, he was just another employee who had made a mistake. A minor incident had triggered everything. A spilled cleaning solution in a restricted executive hallway had damaged an expensive imported rug. It was a small error, one that could have been resolved with a warning or a deduction from salary. But Evelyn had been under immense pressure that week. Major investors were visiting, a merger was at stake, and the company's image had to remain flawless. So she made a decision. Cold. Quick. Final. Daniel Hayes was terminated immediately. He had stood there quietly as the HR manager delivered the news, his hands trembling slightly but his voice steady. He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, thanked them for the opportunity, and walked out of the building carrying a small cardboard box. Inside it were his gloves, a worn-out thermos, and a photo of his daughter. Evelyn didn't even look at him. For her, it was just another decision in a long list of necessary actions. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. 3 days later, Evelyn received a call that changed everything. Her father, Richard Carter, had passed away unexpectedly. The man who had built the foundation of her empire, the man whose approval she had chased her entire life, was gone. The loss hit her harder than she anticipated. Despite their complicated relationship, he had been her anchor, her silent judge, and her greatest motivation. The reading of the will was scheduled immediately. Evelyn entered the room with the same composed demeanor she always carried, but inside, she was unraveling. Memories flooded her mind, childhood moments, harsh lessons, rare glimpses of affection. She wondered what her father had left behind, not just in terms of wealth, but in meaning. The lawyer began reading. Assets, properties, investments, all meticulously listed and distributed. Evelyn received the majority of the business holdings, as expected. But then, the tone shifted. The lawyer paused. And then he read a name that made her heart stop. Daniel Hayes. At first, she thought she had misheard. But then came the details. Daniel was not just mentioned, he was granted a significant portion of Richard Carter's personal estate, including a private trust fund and ownership rights to a smaller but highly valuable subsidiary company. Evelyn's mind raced. It made no sense. Who was Daniel Hayes to her father? Why would a janitor be included in such a will? And then came the final line that shattered everything she thought she knew. Daniel Hayes was her father's son. A secret child. A hidden life. A truth buried for decades. The room fell silent, but inside Evelyn, a storm erupted. She had fired her own brother. The weight of her decision crashed down on her with unbearable force. The image of Daniel standing quietly, accepting his termination without resistance, replayed in her mind again and again. His calmness. His dignity. His silence. Had he known? Had he recognized her? Or had he chosen to remain silent, just like he had done his entire life? Evelyn left the room in a daze. For the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't control: regret. Real, deep, consuming regret. That night, she couldn't sleep. The empire she had built felt meaningless. The power she held felt hollow. All she could think about was a man she had dismissed without a second thought, a man who shared her blood, her father's legacy, and perhaps a lifetime of pain she could never fully understand. The next morning, she made a decision unlike any she had made before. She went looking for him. Daniel's small apartment was located in a quiet, modest neighborhood far from the corporate world Evelyn was used to. When she arrived, she hesitated. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to say. She knocked. The door opened slowly. Daniel stood there, his expression calm but guarded. Behind him, a little girl peeked out, holding a stuffed toy, her innocent eyes observing the stranger at the door. Evelyn saw everything in that moment: the life he had lived, the struggles he had faced, the quiet strength he carried. She tried to speak, but the words felt heavy. Daniel didn't seem surprised to see her. Perhaps he had always known. Perhaps he had been waiting. Instead of anger, there was a quiet understanding in his eyes. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something deeper. Something human. Evelyn realized then that this wasn't about business. It wasn't about power or control. It was about choices. About the moments where kindness could have changed everything. She had failed that test. But maybe, just maybe, she had one more chance. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn didn't try to fix everything at once. She didn't offer money or power. Instead, she showed up. Slowly. Genuinely. She listened. She learned. She began to understand the life Daniel had lived, the absence of a father, the struggle of raising a child alone, the quiet resilience it took to keep going every day. And Daniel, despite everything, allowed her to stay. Not because she was his sister. But because she was trying. The company changed too. Evelyn changed. Policies became more compassionate. Employees were seen, not just managed. Stories mattered. People mattered. Because now she understood what it meant to overlook someone. What it meant to lose someone before even knowing them. And what it meant to find them again. But before this story comes to an end, take a moment and write in the comments: have you ever judged someone too quickly and later realized you were wrong? In time, the bond between Evelyn and Daniel grew, not perfect, not easy, but real. His daughter began calling her Aunt Evelyn, a simple title that carried more meaning than any corporate achievement she had ever earned. And on a quiet evening, standing outside that same apartment, Evelyn realized something profound. Success wasn't measured in profits or power. It was measured in the people you chose not to walk away from. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like these reach more people who need them. Because sometimes, the most important decisions we make are the ones that give someone a second chance.